She told me to leave my own cabin, said I was trespassing on land that's been in my family for 70 years. But what she didn't know? I own the lake, and the only parking lot her entire HOA depends on. What happened next ruined her reputation. Forever. My name's David, I'm 62, and for most of my life, I've been the kind of guy who minds his own business. Retired lineman, father of 2, and the quiet owner of a cabin that's been in my family for nearly 3 generations. That little place up in Pine Valley, resting right on the edge of Evergreen Lake, was never about luxury. It was about peace, history, and holding on to something real. My granddad bought the land in 1956, back when the roads were just gravel, and no one with money wanted anything to do with it. Said it was too remote, too rocky, too wild. But he saw something no one else did. The stillness of the water at dawn, the way the mist rolled off the lake like breath in winter, and the silence that wrapped around you like a warm coat. He built the cabin by hand with my dad. No hired crews, just sweat, hammers, and stubborn love. When he passed, it went to my father, and when Dad died, it became mine. I kept it up over the years, re-shingled the roof, fixed the dock, chopped wood every fall, and stacked it under the awning, like clockwork. I didn't come up here to show off or entertain guests. I came to breathe, especially after I lost my wife to cancer 2 years ago. That lake, it became my church. But peace doesn't last forever, not when people with money and opinions show up. About a year ago, a new development cropped up just over the ridge, rows of glossy modern townhomes with fiber internet, security gates, and designer landscaping. Most of the folks kept to themselves, but I noticed more kayaks and paddleboards. Drifting over into my cove, people assuming the lake was shared, just because they had HOA dues and waterfront views. At first, I let it go. A few of them waved, a couple even complimented my cabin, called it quaint. But I didn't miss the way they looked at me, like I was the old man who hadn't gotten the memo that times had changed. Then came Trish. Mid-40s, bleach blonde, always in Lululemon, always with a clipboard. She introduced herself as the new HOA president with a smile so tight you'd think it was stapled on. "Just making sure everyone's in compliance," she chirped, glancing at my chimney like it offended her. I nodded politely, but something in her tone made me uneasy. The next week, I found a note on my front gate saying my cabin's wood burning. Stove might be contributing to environmental decline and suggesting I convert to propane. I ignored it. Then came a warning letter, this time claiming my dock was obstructing public lake access. That's when the anger started to bubble. Public access? The lake wasn't public. I had the deed, the maps, the surveys. Hell, I even had the receipts from my grandfather's original purchase when the lake was practically a swamp. Still, she kept pushing. One afternoon, I came back from a grocery run to find 2 HOA board members pacing around my fire pit, taking pictures like they were gathering evidence for a court case. When I asked what they were doing, one of them mumbled something about code, compliance, and quickly backed off. That night, sitting alone on the porch, the bottle of bourbon I kept for special occasions open by my side, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not just anger, but betrayal. Betrayal by people who hadn't earned an inch of that land, who thought their bank accounts and bylaws gave them the right to rewrite history. I wasn't going to let it happen. I wasn't just defending a cabin. I was defending my father's legacy, my grandfather's dream, and the one place that had held me together after I buried my wife. These people weren't just pushing paper. They were pushing me out of my own life. And right then, I knew something had to be done. If you've ever had a neighbor or an HOA cross the line like this, trying to bully you off your own land, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell notification. To all, so you don't miss what's coming next. Because what I uncovered about that HOA's little operation flipped everything upside down. See, I went digging through old records one sleepless night just to reassure myself I wasn't losing it. And there it was. Plain as day. Not only did my deed confirm I owned the entire southern half of Evergreen Lake, but the legal property. Line ran straight through the HOA's main gravel parking lot, the one they used for events, paddleboard storage, even their so-called community launch. That's right. Their only way to reach the lake legally ran through my land. And suddenly it wasn't just about defending my rights anymore. It was about reclaiming everything they'd taken for granted. I wasn't just some old man in a cabin anymore. I had the law, the land, and the truth on my side. But before I could act, before I could make the next move, someone trespassed. Not a board member, not Trish. Someone I hadn't seen before. And what they were doing at my cabin. That night, that part you won't believe. It started small, the way most battles do, with a note left on my old iron gate, written in flowery HOA language that tried to sound polite but dripped with arrogance, telling me that my chimney was releasing particulate matter and violating community standards. I laughed out loud when I read it. This was the same chimney my grandfather built with stone hauled by mule from the ridge, the same one that had kept my family warm through snowstorms and blackouts. I figured it was a fluke, a harmless power trip from a woman who didn't understand boundaries, and I tossed the note in the fire. But that was just the first jab. A week later, a second note appeared, this time with an official HOA letterhead and 3 pages of vague language about visual cohesion, unregistered structures, and, my personal favorite, architectural disharmony. Then came a formal letter accusing me of violating setback rules, even though my cabin had stood firm decades before Trish's HOA even existed. I called the county office, and they confirmed what I already knew. My property was grandfathered in. Still, Trish didn't stop. One afternoon, I drove back from town with supplies and found 2 men standing at the edge of my dock, snapping pictures and scribbling on clipboards like they were building a case. They wore matching polos with the HOA logo stitched on the chest, and when I asked what they were doing, one muttered something about assessing potential environmental risk to shared water. Shared water? I asked them whose name was on the lake deed. Neither of them had an answer. They just nodded and backed off like I was the one trespassing. The thing is, I could feel it shifting, not just on paper, but in the air. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to stopped waving. Kayaks stopped drifting near my cove. At the coffee shop in town, people looked at me sideways, as if they'd heard something, as if I was the problem now. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get more absurd, I came home one afternoon and found a notice nailed to my front door like I was some outlaw from an old western. It was signed by the HOA's attorney, full of legal threats and bloated jargon, demanding I vacate the premises within 30 days, or they would pursue formal legal proceedings. I sat on the porch that night, bourbon bottle in hand, staring out across the lake my grandfather once fished from in silence, wondering how we got here. How had things turned so hostile? I'd never bothered a soul. I paid my taxes on time. I mowed my lawn, kept my head down, never once asked for HOA services. I didn't even want to be part of their fake little utopia, but that didn't matter to Trish. She wanted the cabin gone, and more than that, she wanted to make an example out of me, the last holdout who didn't conform, who didn't bow. She wanted to erase the past and replace it with matching townhomes and plastic Adirondack chairs. That wasn't just insulting, it was war. And I knew right then, I had to fight this smart. Because what they didn't realize was I wasn't just some old man in a flannel shirt. I knew how to dig. And the deeper I dug, the more cracks I found in their little empire. See, in the next few days I made phone calls, pulled land surveys, visited the county recorder's office, and confirmed what I'd long suspected but never needed to prove. Trish and her HOA were squatting in part on my land. The gravel lot they used for guest parking, where they held HOA meetings and barbecues and unloaded their precious paddleboards. My deed showed the line ran straight through it. But here's the twist. When I pulled the documents, I found something even more interesting. A signature, buried in an old easement agreement, with a clause that had expired 5 years ago. Which meant legally, that land reverted entirely back to me. And technically, every car parked there from that point forward was trespassing. But before I could act, before I could bring the hammer down, something strange happened. I came back from a weekend in town to find my back gate wide open and muddy boot prints on the porch. Nothing was stolen, nothing broken, but someone had been inside. I found a business card tucked into the screen door from a local land management firm, same one that worked with the HOA. No message, just a name. And that's when I realized This wasn't just a battle over property anymore. Someone was planning something bigger, something I didn't see coming, and if I didn't act fast, I might lose more than just a cabin. I might lose everything. If you want to see what I did next, how I turned the tables in a way that stunned every single one of them, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell notification to all so you don't miss what comes next. Because trust me, the real fight hadn't even started yet. So I went to my safe, that old rusted one tucked behind the workbench, where I kept everything my granddad ever handed down. Letters, war medals, and a thick leather folder, soft with age and packed with brittle papers and original plat maps older than most of the homes in that HOA development. I flipped through them under the dusty glow of my cabin lamp, and there it was. Faint ink lines marking boundaries that stretched well beyond what I'd always considered ours. My heart beat harder. I grabbed my jacket and drove to the county clerk's office, sat down with a woman named Sharon who'd worked there since the 80s, and together we pulled the updated maps. What I saw made my jaw tighten. The gravel lot the HOA used as their precious lakeside parking, a good chunk of it right down the middle, was on my land. I didn't get mad. No, I got focused. I went home, poured myself a strong coffee, and called up an old buddy who'd gone into property law after we hung up, our lineman gear. He referred me to a sharp young attorney named Mason, quiet, precise, no flash, all firepower. We didn't rush it. Over the next 2 weeks, Mason drafted a cease and desist letter so tight you could bounce quarters off it, and we served it to Trish right in the middle of their smug little HOA meeting, which they were holding, ironically, on the gravel lot I now had legal claim to. I wasn't there, but a neighbor filmed it and sent it to me. Trish, sitting in her folding chair, mouth twisted in confusion, then panic, then barely contained rage as she read the document aloud. That alone was sweet, but I wasn't done. The next morning, I walked out with a bright yellow chain, strung it across the entrance to the parking lot, and screwed in a wooden sign I'd painted myself. Private property, no public parking. I went back to my deck, cracked open a beer, and watched the show. SUVs rolled up, slowed, then idled. Confused faces, brake lights, folks trying to figure out where the hell to put their designer kayaks. Trish showed up 10 minutes later, pacing like a cat in a thunderstorm, phone glued to her ear, shouting at someone in a linen blazer. It was glorious. But I wasn't done, because this wasn't just about property anymore. It was about respect. It was about truth. And they'd trampled both. So I called a local news station, Channel 6, and told them I had a story about an HOA building over a private citizen's property. I offered full access. They showed up with a cameraman and a reporter named Darla, who had a nose for drama and a taste for HOA horror stories. I also hired a licensed surveyor, a quiet guy named Tom who'd worked Pine Valley for decades. We walked the boundary lines together, with the cameras rolling, every stake going into the ground like a nail in the coffin. Darla asked smart questions. I answered calmly, even handed her copies of the deed, old maps, the easement expiration, the whole 9 yards. Trish must have heard about the broadcast, because later that afternoon, she stormed down my driveway, red-faced, yelling something about legal recourse and community disruption. I told her flat out to leave my property, and this time she actually listened. You could see the panic setting in behind her eyes. She had built her little HOA fiefdom on quicksand, and now the ground was giving way. The video aired that weekend, and man, you'd think I'd blown the lid off a scandal. My phone lit up with messages, old locals, even a couple folks from the HOA who said they didn't agree with Trish's tactics and had no idea about the land issue. Comments rolled in online. Good for you. That cabin was there before. All of them. Finally, someone standing up to these HOA tyrants. But it wasn't about fame. It was about making it clear. You can't bully people into silence, especially not on their own land. And if you've made it this far, if you're feeling the fire the way I did that day, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you turn on the bell to all so you don't miss what happens next. Because the fight's not over yet. See, Just when I thought the dust was settling, I got a certified letter from the HOA's new legal team. Not Trish's usual guy. This one was from a firm in the city. It was short, but chilling. They weren't backing down. In fact, they claimed the original easement had a renewal clause filed separately, one that had somehow been lost in the records. And that clause? It could shift everything. My attorney looked concerned. He said we might be headed for court after all, but here's the twist. While the legal drama was heating up, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in decades, a man who knew my granddad. He said, "David, there's something in your deed they probably don't know about. Something buried in the fine print. You might want to take another look." So I pulled the folder back out that night, set it down on my old wooden table, and flipped through each page like I was peeling back history. And right there, sandwiched between a tax receipt from 1973 and a hand-drawn sketch of the lake, was a clause so strange, so specific, it made my spine tingle. I stared at it for a long minute, and all I could think was, if this is enforceable, Trish has no idea what's coming. By the following week, the once unshakable Trish had started to unravel, her confident smirk nowhere in sight, as whispers spread through the HOA like wildfire. Their emergency board meeting, which was supposed to be hush-hush, leaked faster than a cracked canoe, and by the time the minutes hit my inbox, anonymously I might add, it was crystal clear that they knew they'd stepped on a legal landmine. The new HOA attorney, a grim-faced guy with a Bluetooth in one ear and a frown carved deep into his jawline, laid it out plain. They'd been parking on private land for years with no valid easement, and they had tried to forcibly remove the rightful owner of the lake they'd falsely advertised in every brochure and online listing as exclusive HOA access. And now that it was public, they were wide open to liability, fraud, trespassing, maybe even misrepresentation. That evening, as a golden haze settled over the lake and the loons called out like echoes from a calmer past, I saw a familiar figure walk up my gravel path. Trish, clipboard replaced by clasped hands, face tight but desperate. She asked if we could put the past behind us, offered to work something out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I told her plainly that I was open to a lease agreement for the parking lot, provided it was based on fair market value, with annual adjustments, and accompanied by a written apology, signed by her and every board member. She blinked, tried to argue. I reminded her that the other option was worse. They could rip up the parking lot and rebuild it on land they actually owned, or face civil charges, lose access to the lake entirely, and explain to every resident why their dues were going toward a legal defense. The silence between us stretched as the breeze rustled through the pines. She left without shaking my hand. 2 days later, a manila envelope arrived by courier. Inside, a typed signed apology admitting fault and a draft lease agreement prepared by their lawyer. My attorney reviewed it line by line, then nodded. We made some changes, namely rent that would put a healthy dent in their budget, and give me the satisfaction of knowing that every month they'd be reminded exactly whose land they were standing on. The agreement was finalized by the end of the week, and at their next HOA meeting, Trish didn't show. Word spread fast. She'd stepped down, citing personal stress and time commitments, but everyone knew the truth. She'd lost. And not just the argument, but the illusion of control. Justice, for once, had a paper trail. I kept the original signed apology in the same leather folder my granddad once kept the deed in. Seemed only right. Now, every morning, I sit on my porch, mug in hand, watching the mist rise off the lake like breath from the land itself, and there's peace again. The parking lot's still there, but it's quiet. No more HOA goons taking pictures, no more bogus citations or threats nailed to my door, and every car parked there, paying rent to the man they once tried to evict. Funny how things turn around. And if you're watching this and felt even a flicker of satisfaction, do me a solid. Click that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell to all so you never miss the next chapter in this wild journey, because believe it or not, there's more. You see, just last week I got a strange call from a woman claiming to be a lawyer representing a developer. She didn't say who, but she asked if I'd ever considered selling the lake. said a high-profile buyer was interested in turning it into a private club. I laughed, told her I wasn't selling anything. But then she said something that stopped me cold. Your grandfather's original deed, does it include the mineral rights under the lake? My blood ran still. I hadn't thought about mineral rights in decades, so I hung up, walked back to the cabin, and opened that old leather folder once more. And right there, in barely legible cursive ink, was a line I'd never noticed before. 1. That just might explain why they were so desperate to get me off that land. Something tells me this story isn't over yet. So what's the lesson here? It's simple, but powerful. Don't ever let someone intimidate you just because they come dressed in authority or armed with official-looking paper. In today's world, too many people think they can rewrite the rules just by talking louder or forming a committee with fancy titles. But the truth? The real power lies with those who know what they own, understand their rights, and refuse to be bullied out of their dignity. I wasn't some angry old man holed up in a shack. I was a son, a father, a widower, and the third generation to care for that land like it was part of my bloodline. And when Trish came at me with her HOA muscle, all puffed up on bylaws and self-importance, what she didn't know is that I had something she couldn't fabricate, a legacy. My grandfather didn't work his whole life just so his grandson could be kicked off the land by someone who didn't like the look of a stone, chimney, or the color of aged wood. Trish learned the hard way that history, patience, and a solid paper trail carry a weight no committee vote can undo. She thought she was dealing with a pushover, someone too old or too tired to fight back. What she got instead was a quiet storm, steady, deliberate, and backed by decades of truth. And here's the thing. There are a lot of us out there, men who built what they have with their own hands, who don't brag or bark orders, who just want peace, a little respect, and to be left alone to enjoy the life they earned. But when someone tries to take that away, when someone crosses that, Circe, we don't just sit back, we act with purpose. So if you've ever had to deal with a power-tripping HOA, or some neighbor who thought they could run your life because they printed out a regulation sheet, drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. I know there are more of you out there, and we're stronger when we share these stories. And if this one hit home for you, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell to all so you don't miss the next twist. Because trust me, this saga isn't over yet. The phone call about the mineral rights under the lake? Yeah. That one's opened a whole new chapter I didn't see coming. And if I've learned anything, it's this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't slamming doors or shouting threats. It's sitting back with your morning coffee calm as ever, while the people who tried to bury you realize you were rooted deeper than they ever imagined. Let the facts talk. Let the truth stand tall. And let them learn. Some lakes can't be moved.